Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful sunny afternoon in Missoula, Montana. Welcome to the 29th Annual State of Missoula. I'd like to ask Mr. Sean Klaus, the chairman of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce, to come up. Notice I choked on that word, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome everybody. It's great to see a large crowd of business and community leaders here to share, to be involved with our chamber, State of Missoula Chamber of Commerce here in Missoula. Our brand is to be a catalyst for a healthy business environment, and one of our values is we really believe that without business there isn't community, and that business is really vital to having a thriving community that we have here in Missoula. Today we are rolling out our new tagline, which is engaging business and community, which is exactly what we're doing here today. So I want to turn it over. Our MC today is Nick Kaufman, and he's going to lead us through our discussion with with our panel members. And we look forward to really engaging conversations with at each of our individual tables. So before Nick comes up, I'd like to lead everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sean. Welcome, everyone. To introduce a few people at the head table, if I could. So I'll start with Mr. James Grunke from the Missoula Economic Partnership. Always have a nose for business. I'd suspect you'd be here today. Thank you very much. And Vicki Judd from Northwestern Energy, one of our visionary partners in support of the Chamber. Our very charming, intelligent, innovative, inspirational, ambitious, tenacious CEO, Kim Luttrell. Mr. Larry Leisure, our Boise connection. He's everywhere. He's everywhere. Mr. John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula. Welcome. Nice to have you here. Undaunted leadership. Thank you, John. Mr. Clay Christian, Chairman of the Board of Regents. You've met Sean Klaus, Ron Albrecht, who's also associated with the Board of Directors in Watson's Children's Center, and Michael Tree from Mountain Lion, and Ken Farago from Roseburg Forest Products. I was thinking of the expansion, Ken, and I lost the name of the company. I look at you and I just think of progress. All right. It's our city, it's your business. The Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce is a catalyst in this community for a healthy business environment. Without business, there really is no community. Sean talked to you about our tagline, and our tagline is engaging business and community. And we didn't put community last necessarily because it's so important. And one of the things I like to acknowledge while I'm up here today is Susan Hay Patrick. Would you stand up for me for a minute, Susan? Director of United Way. How you coming with your goals? I've got a check for you, young lady, if you want to come up and grab this. Now, engaging business and community. You business people, it's time for your quarterly taxes. It's time to help the United Way in their efforts to achieve their goals. And that's one way business and community can work together. So there she is, and that's where she's sitting. So one of the things that the Chamber does to engage business and community is our advocacy and how we're involved in both local and state politics. Recently, we supported the mill levy for Mountain Lion. We also were heavily involved at the legislature last time relative to support for Missoula College and also tax increment financing districts in partnership with the city and Missoula County. And Ellen Buchanan is here today to talk a little bit about tax increment financing and how it works in redeveloping Missoula, which is the title of our program today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the head table. And our first technology challenge. So Ellen Buchanan. So Ellen is a native of the southern Appalachian Mountains of East Tennessee. She is a director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency and lives and works in downtown Missoula. She's a graduate of Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, where she received a degree in architecture with an emphasis in urban design. She has held positions with local government and economic development, planning and community development in a wide variety of locations in the United States. She's also spent time in private practice as a planner and urban designer. Ellen has a passion for downtown and central city redevelopment. That originated with her father, being a downtown merchant, and fostered by 7 years of living and working in New York City. She's one of the founders of the River City Roots Festival. She has 2 grown children who recently moved back to the Southeast. Well, judgment wasn't passed on, I guess, in this case. She's also married. A warm welcome for Ellen Buchanan, please. Our next panelist, award-winning smile, Mr. Craig Erickson with the Woodbury Group. Craig was born in Glendive, where he managed the family retail business. In 1989, he started a 22-year career in property management, leasing retail office projects near Salt Lake City. Craig's expertise and passion is working with owners, architects, contractors, tenants, and cities in an effort to create new or redeveloped retail projects. I know from personal experience you work with land use planners every once in a while, too, Craig. In 2011, Woodbury Corporation created an opportunity for Craig to work with over 11 million square feet of property spanning 14 states. Times are crazy, challenges are plentiful, and Craig is in his element, seeing new product, markets, selling, and employing the new relationships that come with the territory. While not working, Craig's passions include being a musician, playing golf, working out, and riding his Harley. He and his wife, Wendy, have 2 grown daughters. Warm welcome for Mr. Craig Erickson. Thank you, Craig. A very, very familiar face on the podium, Mr. Gary Chumrow. Gary was born and raised in Missoula. He graduated from Stanford University in 1973 and the University of Montana School of Law in 1977. He's a partner at Garlington Lawn and Robinson. Gary's practice includes commercial law, transactions, banking law, secured transactions, and real estate. As Gary has matured, his primary focus has become hospital and health care. Yeah, that's right. Join that club. He's been involved in numerous joint venture arrangements between tax-exempt healthcare entities and private physicians. Gary was designated by the Best Lawyers publication as the 2014 Corporate Law Lawyer of the Year in Missoula. Community and charitable service has always been important to Gary. He is active as a fundraiser and has served on many governing and advisory boards in Missoula. Gary and his wife Cindy have 2 adult children. His outside interests are golf and skiing. Warm round of applause for Mr. Gary Chumrow. And associated with Gary in the presentation today is Mr. Chuck Hansberry, also a partner at Garlington Lawn and Robinson. They'll both be speaking about new markets tax credits. Chuck was raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and attended Wake Forest University. During his college summer, he worked on a ranch in Wyoming and for some reason fell in love with the West. Imagine that. He graduated from the University of Montana with Juris Doctorate and MS in Environmental Studies. Chuck worked with Holland and Hart in Billings, and in 2005 he accepted a position with Garlington Lawn and Robinson. Chuck's practice is in the area of commercial, environmental, and employment litigation. Chuck and his wife, Dawn, have 2 children. Chuck spends his free time, when he can get some, running the mountain trails in the area. And please welcome Chuck Hansberry. And our anchor presenter today, Dr. Royce Engstrom, down at the end of the table. He was born in Michigan. President Engstrom grew up in Nebraska and graduated from the University of Nebraska at Omaha and has a PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. President Engstrom has been an enthusiastic participant in undergraduate research as a student, a mentor, and as an administrator working to develop undergraduate research programs. He is a past president of the Council on Undergraduate Research. He came to Missoula in 2007 from the University of South Dakota, where he served as professor and chair of chemistry, vice president for research, dean of the graduate school, provost and vice president for academic affairs. He taught a variety of chemistry classes and conducted an active research program in electrochemistry and analytical chemistry. The University of Montana's 17th president, Dr. Royce C. Engstrom, assumed his duties on October 15th of 2010. After serving as provost and vice president for academic affairs, President Engstrom is interested in science, science policy, higher education, public policy, program development, and in building relationships between the various stakeholders in higher education. His wife, Mary, also an educator, has worked in both K-12 level and at the university level. They have 2 grown children, Tyler and Carrie. In his spare time, Dr. Engstrom enjoys building traditional wooden boats and canoeing. A warm round of applause for Dr. Royce Engstrom. Thank you for being here. Ellen Buchanan, would you like to come up and talk to us about redevelopment, tax increment financing?
All right. That might be a first. I'm going to try to cover a lot of material in a fairly compressed amount of time, so maybe if I don't get to something, you can ask questions later. I'm going to start with just a little bit about Tax Increment 101, what tax increment is, what it can do, and what it can't do. This tool was created by the state of Montana in the late 70s. Missoula had leadership at the time that was wise enough to take advantage of this new law and start creating urban renewal districts. Basically what this is a tool that allows communities to direct property taxes from new development within specific geographic areas. The concept is that the state authorized locally driven funding mechanism for community and economic development. It really is aimed at the elimination of blight and the correction of deficient infrastructure, stabilization of neighborhoods and growing tax base. And the way it works is that when a tax increment district is created, whether it's an urban renewal district or some of the other types, there's a base year, and that's the year the district is created. That's this kind of yellow portion that you see at the bottom of the graph. The property taxes, and this tool is all about property taxes, not income taxes or anything else, it's property taxes. So the property taxes that are going to the taxing jurisdictions in that base year, city, the county, the schools, et cetera, continue to go to those taxing jurisdictions for the duration of the district. All the growth in taxes that takes place, whether it's because a new building is built or a building is renovated, goes into a special fund, and that money is reinvested through the redevelopment agency back into that geographic area. At the end of the district, all of those increased revenues go to the taxing jurisdictions as new revenue. And I think there's an argument to be made that those new taxes would not have been created but for the use of tax increment financing to encourage development. Some of the things that we can use tax increment money for is purchase of property, demolition of buildings and site demolition, correction of infrastructure deficiencies or the construction of new infrastructure, and that may be streets, sidewalks, utilities, all of the things. And these days we hear a lot about telecommunications, and the kind of new piece of infrastructure that we're finding is probably almost as important as water and sewer. And also environmental remediation. So a couple of things that people don't necessarily understand about tax increment money. It's not part of the city's general fund. This is a pot of money that's totally set aside. Being in an urban renewal district does not cause any kind of increase in taxes. You just get the benefit of any new property taxes being spent back in your neighborhood, back in your geographic area. The funds are administered by the MRA board. That board is appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council, so there's a public process in terms of who serves on that board and who makes the ultimate decisions. And then with respect to a number of things, city council has to specifically approve any land transactions. Our budget is approved every year. MRA can't own property, so if we purchase property, we purchase it for the city. New programs that are tweaks of or outside of what specifically is spelled out in state enabling legislation. And anytime we borrow money when we issue bonds, it's actually the city council that issues those bonds, not the redevelopment agency. We currently have 4 districts in Missoula. We had the original district was the downtown district. That sunsetted in 2005. And just to give you an example of the power of the tool, when that district was in existence, over the life of it, there was over $20 million invested in the downtown of tax increment money, and that leveraged over $20 million of other investment, be that private dollars, leveraging state or federal funding, being able to get grants and that sort of thing. When that district ended in 2005, the city realized an increase in tax revenues of somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000 a year. Same for the county, and the schools was over $700,000. So that's the power of tax increment financing. The districts that we have right now, the oldest district is Urban Renewal District 2, this area in orange. It was created in 1990. It's basically the Brooks-Russell corridor and goes over to the railroad tracks. It includes the old sawmill district, the Civic Stadium. The second district second oldest is Urban Renewal District 3, which is basically the Brooks corridor with, you'll notice a little donut hole in the middle, which is Southgate Mall. That's not included in the district. And our 2 newer districts are the Front Street District, which is basically from Madison back and across Higgins and picks up Caris Park from Main Street to the river. And the last district that we created, that was created in 2007, and in 2008 we created the Riverfront Triangle, which both of these districts were part of the original downtown district and just didn't get the reinvestment or the redevelopment that some of the other parts of downtown experienced. Riverfront Triangle we've been working on for decades, I guess, at this point, to try to redevelop. That's where the old Fox Theater site was. We have a group of developers who have the city-owned portion of that land tied up doing their due diligence, and we think in the next 4 or 5 months you'll see some pretty exciting news about how that property might be redeveloped. We're also working on the creation of 2 new districts. This is a district that is bounded by North Reserve Street, Scott Street, the interstate, and the railroad tracks. It's a very large district that by and large has almost no infrastructure. A good bit of it is not in the city limits, but should it be annexed, it would become part of the district if we create it. We're going through a study of blight right now, and there's a meeting this evening with the property owners that are within this study area, and also another district that we're looking at called the East Broadway District that would extend from the interstate to across the river to the trail, Madison Street, and then east to a point that we haven't really determined yet. That'll be determined by the study of blight, probably somewhere in the vicinity of the new Missoula College location. The core of tax increment and being able to establish a district is blight, and that's a term that I think a lot of people find to be concerning or offensive, but it has a broad number of definitions in state law. And it ranges, anything from public health and safety issues to dilapidated buildings or properties, infrastructure deficiencies or lack thereof, substandard utilities. There may not be adequate sewer, there may not be adequate water, there may not be adequate other types of infrastructure. And a lot of times an area that's blighted, the property taxes that are being generated really aren't even enough to support the services that area requires. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of blight. This is obviously lack of sidewalks, lack of physical infrastructure along the street. Here we have underutilized property in the middle of town and dilapidated buildings. This is the old sawmill district, or the mill site, Champion Mill Site. Here are a couple of examples of before and afters where blight was eliminated partially through the use of tax increment. This is Riverfront Place on Front Street before. Here's what we have there today. This is Central Square. Here's what we have there today. Both of these projects had tax increment as part of the kind of but-for money that made them be able to pencil. This is Caris Park before the use of tax increment. There's Caris Park today. I think we attract, hundreds of thousands of visitors to that park every year that didn't necessarily spend time in downtown in the early 80s. This was the Missoula Riverfront in 1961, and here's what it looks like today. It's quite a transformation. And a lot of that is because of this tool that the community leaders created back around 1980. One of the things that we've taken on in recent years, when the recession hit, we had a fair amount of unobligated money in both Districts 2 and 3. That's the Brooks Corridor and the Broadway-Russell corridors. We went to our board and said, look, we've got construction people who are out of work, we have money in the bank, and we have neighborhoods that will maybe never have sidewalks. So let's build sidewalks. We improve the quality of the commercial areas, we improve quality of neighborhoods. The board said, go do it. So here's an example of Bow Street before, and there's with the sidewalks. Central Avenue with sidewalks added. They're example of these that we've done in residential neighborhoods along Brooks, and we're starting to see reinvestment in those areas because we have made the public investment. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of large projects that we do. The biggest one is obviously the former Champion Lumber Mill Site. Maybe the largest redevelopment project in the state. It's 45 acres. All of you have heard about it ad nauseum, I'm sure, because we've been working on it for over 10 years. But because it was in a tax increment district, once it was annexed into the city, and because some private developers were able to get the ability to purchase the land, we created a partnership, and here's the master plan for that area. Obviously McCormick Park, the Civic Stadium, Silver Park, which will be as part of this 45 acres that's being redeveloped. And what's happened to date is that Silver Park, a new 14.5 acre park on the river, is almost complete. We'll see the completion of that probably in March or April, weather dependent, of course. You'll note the structures in this park. They're timber frame structures that are from reclaimed lumber from the old sawmill buildings and from sinker logs that we were able to buy when the dams came out at Bonner and Milltown. Wood waste was recycled, turned into mulch. That was is being used in the park. Concrete foundations were crushed. Those are being used as structural fill for the private development when it happens. So it's a great example of recycling. What's happened today is that the park is almost finished. We've replaced the old railroad trestle that was there, which was an agreement we had with Montana Rail Link in order to be able to have a permanent right-of-way through there and even allow that property to be developed. And Wyoming Street has been constructed. This is a new east-west connector that connects Russell and Orange Street. Badly needed. If you've been on 3rd Street around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it doesn't work so well. Both of those intersections will ultimately be signalized. Another pretty exciting project that tax increment was instrumental in is when Front Street District was being contemplated, First Interstate Bank was going through a decision process. They were in an obsolete facility. They had an HVAC system that needed a very expensive upgrade. They had facilities that didn't work for them. So the question became, do we renovate? Probably not. Do we build a new bank out on a greenfields location like a lot of other banks were doing at the time and still continue to? Or do we rebuild in our current location, There's always been a bank on this corner, so we think the right thing is to rebuild in this location. If we do that, are we going to rebuild just what we need for our own use, or do we build a Class A office building that is badly needed in downtown? If they're going to build the Class A office building, the multi-story building, there's got to be parking available. So they came to the city, we worked with them and other property owners. Macy's was in play at the time, and parking was needed to try to keep them in downtown at the time, now to try to refill the building. So we created the district. We built Park Place, which I think is a pretty stunning example of what you can do with a parking garage. First Interstate built their building. The property taxes that First Interstate is paying from their building are being used to pay off the debt that built the parking garage for the tax increment portion of it. That was a partnership with the Parking Commission. I think we've got $3.5 million in tax increment bonds in the parking structure. Parking Commission has $4 million in parking revenue bonds. Great partnership. We've gotten 2 great buildings out of it, and we think that the future is bright for that Front Street district. The other goal is to try to start to pull some of the surface parking off of the riverfront, as is spelled out in the downtown master plan. Parking structures are the only way we're going to be able to do that. And MRA's had a hand in all of the parking structures that have been built downtown. We built Central Park, did Bank Street, Partner, and Park Place. The Safeway grocery store downtown, tax increment dollars were used to do the site improvement work for that and put in the trails and some remediation. That allowed a new grocery store to be built, Safeway to stay in downtown, and, St. Pat's to buy the old Safeway property, which will allow them to consolidate their campus on the north side of Broadway, which is their goal. Former Intermountain Lumber sales on Russell Street, been vacant for any number of years. Local group comes along, they buy the property. Housing Authority had previously owned it, and where's my arrow? Okay, so we now have public housing back here on Catlin. We've got 220-some new apartment units, market rate apartment units going on the balance of it. We have Lifestyle Fitness, a new fitness center going on the Russell Street frontage. There will be a community garden, community meeting space. The Milwaukee Trail was continued through here. And, you know, a lot of this is, the reason this worked is because we had the ability to issue tax increment bonds to build the street and the infrastructure that was required for this development to happen. So we'll have a new through street through here. The new multifamily, it's all on the trails. Great connections to the university and to downtown. A couple of small projects. I think a lot of people think that we spend the bulk of our money on large projects with large developers, and that's simply not the case. I think if you ran the numbers, 90% of what we do is local developers and smaller projects, particularly in the past. This is a current one. This is a couple of local folks that decided they wanted to open a microbrewery down in the south end of town on the Brooks Corridor. So this is the building on McDonald that Great Burn Brewing is going into. And through the use of tax increment funds, this is what it'll become. And one of the programs that we've put together in District 3, the Brooks Corridor, is what's called a facade improvement program. And it's money that can be used if you could make your facade better, make it more pedestrian friendly, use more energy efficient materials, include more landscaping, put in those amenities that are lacking in an awful lot of that district, we can give you a grant to do that. And so the picture on top is what they were able to do with the resources that they had available to them. The picture on the bottom is what's going to be built as a result of the use of the facade improvement program money. This is another building that took advantage of that program. This was the old Holiday gas station just south of Pierce Flooring. Basically, all they could do and make it pencil was paint the exterior. They came to us, and this is the result of that infusion of tax increment money in that project. Here's another example. Missoula Nissan took advantage of that and other programs that we had available in that district, and here's the transformation that took place there. This is an interesting project. I was talking about the sidewalk projects earlier. This is in District 3 on, I think, Eaton. Because of the city's investment in the sidewalks in that area, Colin Bangs made the decision to purchase some property and build townhouses there, and I don't think he would have ever thought about doing that without the ability to access our money, and then also the ability, the investment that we'd already made by putting sidewalks in that neighborhood. So we have, I think, 6 new townhouses there on what was a vacant piece of property right on the trail called Bitterroot Townhomes. There's been a little bit of discussion lately about a new Starbucks coming into town. We've gotten a few emails, and I want to talk just very briefly about how that works. You know, we're not giving money to Starbucks. There's a developer who wants to develop a piece of property, and Starbucks happens to be the tenant. We're not in the business of picking and choosing who should be the retail users or the end users of buildings. We're more interested in how the building behaves in the district. This is what we have today. It's an old gas station. It's sited like gas stations were sited. It has little to do with anything other than vehicles. We're trying to make this area more pedestrian friendly. We're trying to improve it aesthetically. And when the developers came to us with this project, we sat down and said, well, we think you can do better than what you're proposing. We'd like the building closer to the street. We'd like additional landscaping. And we're not unhappy about this building not being there anymore. And this is what we're going to get in its place. Starbucks may be there for the next 20 years. They may be there for 20 months. But we've got a better building, sited better, that something else can go in. And a perfect example of that is what happened with the downtown Starbucks, where they came in, renovated the building, made a huge improvement. Starbucks didn't last. We now have Jimmy John's. We have outdoor seating. We just got a much better project than we had to start with. And I'm going to quickly go through a little bit of discussion about South Crossing, but Craig Erickson's going to go into way more detail about that, about that project and the interaction between the developers and MRA. So this is the old Kmart site. And we worked with the developers of this site to kind of change the nature of the project. And once again, I'll let Craig talk about that. But one of the things that we will be funding, the MRA is funding, are the public improvements. We're funding the demolition of the Kmart building itself. But the public improvements in terms of the sidewalks, street trees, traffic signal, those things. So what they were required to do as a result of this project is they had to provide a new traffic signal at Door Lane and Brooks, sidewalks on the south side of Brooks, and new sidewalks on the west side of Door Lane. We went to our board and said, look, we've talked for years about how we need to change the nature of Brooks, and here's our opportunity to start doing that. So this is what we're going to build, as opposed to just dealing with what's going on those particular frontages. We're going to completely rebuild that intersection. We're going to do curb extensions. We're doing pedestrian crosswalks. This is Brooks today. This is what Brooks will look like. We're going to have pedestrian scale street lighting, and street trees and all of those things that make this a pleasant environment for something besides cars. We're going to have bike lanes. We're going to start trying to narrow down the travel lanes so that we transform that area. And beyond that, the board made a commitment to do this to every intersection between Paxson and Reserve Street. So where the medians stop on Brooks and it just kind of explodes into this football field running down through town, we're going to change the nature of that whole thing. And that was totally catalyzed by the redevelopment of the Kmart site by the Woodbury Company. Last thing, Nick had asked me to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face with the state legislature. Every 2 years, we spend 3 months defending tax increment financing as a tool. We work with, the changes that the legislators have tried to make range from trying to eliminate TIF altogether to changing it in such a way that it really weakens it as an economic development tool, to even changing definitions and terminology like the use of the word blight, which seems like a simple change until you start looking into it and you realize that that term has meaning on the federal level, and it leverages other funds like HUD funds. And so when you start tinkering with a word just because you don't like the way it sounds, it may have serious unintended consequences. So Chris and I spend literally 3 months working with the League of Cities and Towns, with our legislators, with lobbyists, with other cities and counties, and any organizations that are sympathetic to this tool as an economic development tool. And I've said this, and the mayor said this many times, I think this is certainly the most powerful economic development tool that cities and counties have available to them, and it may be the only real tool that we have easy and constant access to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. A little reminiscing there. That gas station was where I worked when I moved to Missoula and started going to college. I didn't know it was that old. Ellen reminded me about partnerships. I'll move with my microphone here. And I'd be remiss to not mention partnerships with city and county government. We have a couple of city council members here, some county commissioners. Most of all, we have some wonderful staff in the county. I saw Barb Martins in the audience, and I see Don Baru and Denise Alexander, Laval Means over here. If I missed any of our staff or local governing body people, thank you very much for what you do and how you partner with the Missoula Chamber. On your tables are business cards. It's how we help you get innovative information, and on the back side is an access point for tools for small business. With redevelopment funds, come on up here, Craig Erickson. You tried once. Didn't know I was that intimidating. I'm just teasing you. So Craig and I worked together on the Albertsons project at 39th and Russell a long time ago when you were with POB Montgomery. That Albertsons store, part of the parking lot we reserved for cars, became a housing project. I'm going to shut up and you can talk to us how redevelopment money has helped you in your career. Craig Erickson.
I jumped up real quick when Ellen finished because I wanted to question her on TIF funds not being available to developers. I thought they were personal funds as well because I just ordered a new Harley. You got to be smarter than the computer. That's not my strong suit. So, okay, perfect. First of all, welcome, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here for the State of Missoula Commerce Report, Redeveloping Missoula. Thanks to the Chamber, City, and those responsible for asking me to come speak here today. I appreciate it. As Nick mentioned, I started working in Missoula in the late 1990s at my former company was a property management company. I was the leasing team for that, and we developed a new grocery-anchored center called Russell Square. Many of you know that on the corner of 39th and Russell. Convenience, new construction, need for services. The lease up on that project turned out to be fairly easy because of the demand. The incentives developed by two, we had to, as Nick mentioned, we turned that into more of a multi-use project with multi-tenant pads, and then we ended up selling excess property for a housing development. So that's kind of Russell Square. I'm not going to be talking about that too much, but they asked me to kind of introduce what else have I worked on in Missoula. But it's been a great project, and we're really happy with Russell Square and continue to be today. The Kmart Center is what I'm really here to talk about that's now turning into South Crossing. In mid-2011, I left my former company after about 17 years. I was affiliated with Woodbury Corporation. Our company was in different project and the leasing side of things, and I joined Woodbury Corporation. Woodbury is a company that's been in business for over 90 years. They have over 11 million square foot of property under ownership and management. It's now a fourth-generation company. Their 11 million square feet is retail, office, hotel, and investment properties in 14 different states. In the mid-'70s, Woodbury was also a preferred developer for Kmart properties all out through the Midwest. a gentleman by the name of Wally Woodbury, who George Lambros I know has fond memories of and whatnot. He was a preferred developer, meaning that Kmart would go when they wanted to open up a store. They'd find locations, great locations, and ask the Woodbury Corporation to partner up with them on those properties. One such property is the current location at the southeast corner of Brook Street and Reserve Street, former Kmart location right here in Missoula. The standard layout for these properties were basically big boxes, and they incorporated grocery stores back then. And it's my understanding this particular property was known, or this area was known as kind of the 93 Strip. I found that out reading through some old articles after Kmart announced their closing. And at that point, there was a leapfrog trend to have retail leaving the downtown areas, which is the need for that particular project. The original site plan, as you see here, is kind of interesting. As you see, big, wide open spaces. You got asphalt, asphalt, and more asphalt. The few pad buildings, the little or no landscaping. In this particular plan, you see landscaping beds, but those really aren't landscaping beds. Those are just painted on, I think. Because as many of you know, there was no green in this project. It was almost unheard of there. I can only imagine, back in my day anyway, having a parking lot like this and going in the wintertime, and be a lot of fun doing a lot of donuts. The Kmart, while they continue to operate stores, the challenge for that is they've kind of lost their niche in the market. They've become kind of old and tired. And one of the challenges with that is with the adjacent property, what used to be started out with grocery turned to, they're not a great anchor. The turnover from grocery to discount to furniture, creating uncertainty for the consumers. The last two slides are indicative of what the project looked like for almost 40 years, as you can see the dates on this, which is somewhat unfortunate, but it's important to know that Kmart and in this case, Woodbury Corporation, they had great locations, but the developer, Woodbury Corporation, was at the mercy of what Kmart ultimately wanted to do with that property. Their cost basis was so low that they continued to operate and actually were making money in the store. Fantastic locations, so they could just hang on to the property. At the same time, companies like Woodbury would try to buy them out, but seeing the value of that asset was deteriorating. It's frustrating for both owners of the property and the neighborhoods surrounding those properties. Old and tired buildings. Can you say blight, as Ellen mentioned earlier? They were kind of an eyesore for the developers, the community, and especially the neighborhood again. Closed portions of the stores, in this case the auto shop and the landscape portion of Kmart closed early while Kmart continued to operate. In early 2012, finally, Woodbury Corporation, it was I joined them in 11. We just were worked on, one of the first things I did work on was trying to get them to get this property back, because seeing the potential, finally we were able to strike a deal with Kmart where we were able to buy the parcel and the building, and then of course our redevelopment opportunities began. Subsequently to that, Kmart closed in July of 2012. There was a negative to that after the newspaper article came up. Of course, you lose 50 jobs as a result of that closure. And you still, which was kind of a flip-flop effect from when Kmart was operating and we were turning over the adjacent property. Now you have in this case, the furniture store continued to operate while Kmart was closed. What that meant for Woodbury Corporation and me personally was fairly exciting, whereas at that point, Kmart closing, after we had bought the property, we just go out and figure out, okay, who can we go out and find as potential anchors and food and retail tenants for this property. The prospects and the generate interest from the tenants to come to Missoula, anchors are the driving force behind any project, and who and why not here. Who might be willing to locate was our exercise of choice there. Obviously, with a great location on a great corridor with the cross streets of Reserve and Brooks, became imperative for serious tenants to consider this project. It didn't hurt to have what I would consider probably the best mall in the state of Montana right down the street. So the retail was already there, things were working, so that was actually great. The main questions for tenants coming in really was, who are the anchors? We went through several different site plans as we looked at replacing the tenancy in this project. As Ellen can attest to, in the city, you know, we brought in different site plans. Some would have just a one-tenant grocery anchor. Some would have the boxes, the mid-boxes, these type of things. We use different tenant prototypes on these different plans, staggering large boxes along with mid-sized boxes, pads in different places on the project. So those weeks turned into months working through the process, but laying out the several tenancies, it was critical to determine what would what would ultimately work in this project and what was going to be the long-term solution for this property. Probably the biggest challenge, and still trying to keep interest in the tenants and our brokers for a project like this, because I was out marketing the project, and certainly even to this day, until you have your anchors solidified, they're signed, and we know where we're going, it's hard to know what other tenants and buildings you can bring into the project. One of the, in early 2012, early 2013, with genuine interest from several anchors, but specifically two, we felt good about running with, and we contacted the city of Missoula. We scheduled the meetings with the city staff, and they brought in the Missoula Redevelopment Agency to meet with us as well. We talked about our goals and our sharing of plans for the redevelopment of the Kmart Center. Part of that was sharing who our lead tenants were, and then sharing potential site plans. The MRA was discussed their program benefits and how best we could qualify for those benefits. Ideas about plan layouts, long-term planning, and vision was discussed with the MRA staff. Obviously, questions about using existing buildings became clear, as we could not help but look at the cost of demolition, of parking lot, of buildings. There were those in our company that certainly looked at the project and still were looking at it and saying, geez, we have an existing Kmart building. It's still in fairly good shape. We brought up architects to look over the building, looked at the roof, the structure, everything down to the parking lot, everything else. And obviously we had that opportunity to just reface the building and put parking lot lights up in the parking lot and move on, restripe the parking lot. You could go that direction. We took the information from the MRA and those discussions, we took that back to Woodbury. We felt like we understood the MRA funding and what benefits we would have. We revised our pro formas reflecting such funding, feeling like we were making the progress and excited about assistance we'd be getting. From the MRA, we updated our marketing materials, sent that out, and then moved towards creating elevations using those existing the tenants that we had the most interest from. On about April, May of 2000, we had letter of intent signed by two major tenants. Focused on those two operators, we developed these plans initially, which have morphed over time. And of course, you're seeing that as a result of what's there today. The elevations created were for anchor buildings, and then we incorporated those incorporating the lead tenant specifications. Reflection of the materials that they used, as well as those we believed would be reflective of the outdoors and the beauty of Montana. We incorporated colors, materials, elevations to be complementary to the area. And those elevations would create excitement in the neighborhood and the community is what we were after. In May of 2013, we then met with the Board of Commissioners for the MRA. We shared with them, by the way, your Board of Commissioners is a fantastic group. We had a wonderful experience with them. They were very receptive of what we were bringing. We shared the lead tenants, and with strong influence from MRA, we contacted two noted local architectural and design firms, construction and engineering firms. We were informed the board that we would be working with these two firms in an effort to get our site work the way they wanted it. This would give them the confidence that we were doing our due diligence and we would understood the process. It was our understanding that, that typically MRA requires one submittal for a project with eligible expense detailed. In our case, that was not possible. One of the challenges we had to go in and say, with the lead tenants, specifically Cabela's, we had agreed to deliver their pad site in July, I believe, is what we had to have their pad work finished. And again, this is in May, so we had to have a pad delivered and all their site work done at the end of November, which turned out to be a fairly monumental task. So the things that we needed to do was first demo the Kmart building. Once that was demoed, then we could start developing and delivering a pad. Then we could start on our site work as well. In addition, we need to determine our improvements and related cost in an effort to deliver the best project possible for South Crossing. But that was going to require more time, so we told them we would need to be coming back, but we needed to move forward. We would be doing all the improvements you see on this particular site plan, as Ellen showed you earlier, but we'd have to, with the timeline to meet, we had requested TIP funding for the demolition of the buildings, site work in the effort to meet those aforementioned timelines to keep moving with our tenants. We also noted that we'd be submitting a request in the future for more eligible tax increment assistance to finish the remainder of the site. We did receive the board approval for TIF funding in the amount of $565,000 with an understanding we'd be having to come back for more after that, because typically it's our understanding that the MRA likes you to come in and ask for everything that you know you're going to ask for one time and don't come back. I don't think that's really what you said, but it's it's kind of the way we understood things. So subsequent to receiving the approval from the TIF funding, we laid out additional improvements we agreed to. In addition to the Kmart funding, we agreed to replace it with 2 anchors, construct 3 new building pads out on the street, install sidewalks, and then we'd install the street curbs and the landscaping. We revised the plan. Now, making some real progress, the MRA agreement was signed. In July of 2013, Cabela's lease was executed. Cabela's publicly announced they are coming to Missoula. Another big part of our project and what happened in August of 2013 is we signed a lease with Boot Barn. Fun begins. Kmart starts coming down. It was demolished. It was the event that showed the city and the community that we were actually moving forward, and TIF funds were a big help in those in that plan. Another benefit of the TIF funding was the commencement of the demolition of the parking lot and utilities. I mentioned before discussions internally whether or not to demolish the K buildings with just Kmart building. With just a facelift of the building, we would not have to do anything to the parking lot, as I mentioned before. When you add the buildings and replace them, however, and in this case, putting pads out front, a requirement to upgrade the site became imperative. Not wasting any time after delivery of their pad, Cabela's started moving on their construction, and what seemed like just days, it was longer than that, but immediately you saw Cabela's started going vertical. Needing to deliver that site by the end of November, our site work took on kind of a life of its own, bringing in fill, installation of curb and gutter, parking lot lighting, landscape beds, etc. From those wide open spaces before, asphalt, more asphalt, this site would be a complete transformation. Simultaneously with Cabela's construction and the site work, we commenced a complete remodel of the existing furniture building, which is now Boot Barn. Boot Barn wanted to be open for the holiday season. This turned out to be an interesting, monumental task as well, and there are many to help. Thanks for that. One high-ranking city official was kind enough to take time on a holiday in the fall to inspect work in order to keep us working. I don't know for sure, but being on a construction timeline during hunting season in Missoula is probably pretty hard. But I commend our contractor and want you to know how much you guys should appreciate the firms that you have in this town, because they did some fantastic work. Thanks to all. One hiccup we ran into during the process is that we had to change our site plan due to meeting with the state of Montana. And note that this was after we had the site plan as part of as an exhibit to the Boot Barn lease, and more importantly to the Cabela's lease, as well as a exhibit to the signed letter of intents we had with some of our anchor tenants. What happened here was that because of the streetlight on Door Lane, we had to move our site further, or the main entry of the site further from the traffic signal, which required us to split our pads. So we not only had to remove the pad, but it was affecting the site work as it related to where our entries were going to be, drive lanes, etc. So the project well underway. We're trying to live up to our commitment. Site work completed, delivering building pads, complete renovation. We went back to the MRA board, and on December 4th, we revealed our plan of finishing off the improvements. More specifically, this is the right-of-way improvements Ellen showed earlier on Brooks and Door Lane. Our purpose was, with MRA's strong influence, was to create a gateway into the Midtown Missoula. Change is what we change in from what was currently a freeway, no visual, noise, not pedestrian friendly or not bicycle friendly. These improvements that Ellen detailed were most likely not have been substantial, would have not been able to be completed as substantial completion as they are moving forward without TIF assistance. Without the MRA assistance, we most likely would have fought against paying for the traffic signal, as well as we would have fought against the extents of the improvements that we're doing there. Now, in addition, the enhanced improvements, completely changing the nature of the Brooks and the Door corridor. Missoula is lucky to have the availability of this type of funding. From a developer's standpoint, these type of improvements are fantastic to have, not only for the project itself, but for the tenants, the attraction to bring other tenants in, and really the longevity and the success of the tenants going forward. Looking forward, as Ellen's had showed you as well, we think the end product, as a result of TIF funding, will change this whole complexion of that area. Starting with this South Crossing project, it'll be a positive change to the immediate area, continuing throughout the balance of the district. Now you'll have a street with visual noise and eye appeal. Buildings, landscape, and decorative elements line the street. A safer environment for those pedestrians and bicyclists. In early December, our first opening occurred. Boot Barn's opening was a big milestone moving this project forward. I think the transformation from the building that was there and what is now is fantastic. Cabela's is set to open in May of this year. And without the help of TIF funding, they help deliver quality tenants like Cabela's. They come in, and I think it's going to be a fantastic project moving forward. I think bottom line, TIF funding was a driving line and influence force of what you'll see in the development of the South Crossing Shopping Center. Arguments, they're clearly abundant, relating to the positive influence MRA had in the completion of this project. We believe having TIF funding was huge in helping us attract the tenants we have, and ultimately in helping them all succeed in the future. I think if you look around, not only in your community, but anywhere, you're going to find projects where maybe a developer did the facelift of an existing building and just did the minimal improvements. In our, around our office, we basically say that's putting lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. without the MRA, we may have opted to re-tenant the Kmart building. But instead, we believe South Crossing will be a project that will be a staple in the Missoula community and a driver for better things to come in Midtown Missoula. In closing, I want to thank the many people that have helped get South Crossing to where it is today and what it will become. The mayor, John Engen, was instrumental and very receptive to meetings and making time for us. The city of Missoula planning staff and all the city officials have been fantastic to work with. The Missoula Redevelopment Agency, the Missoula Board of Directors, especially Ellen Buchanan. The firm CTA, WGM, Missoula, you've been lucky to have such talent in your communities. Finally, Quality Construction, Western Excavating, who have met timeless time frames that would have otherwise just been unbelievable. They've really helped us get into this project. So welcome to South Crossing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. While we're doing commercial announcements, and thank you for that one, by the way, you go ahead and do this. No, you come in. You do that. Get that ready. First Security Bank, Northwestern Energy, Missoula, and University of Montana are visionary sponsors. Thank you very much. It's like old home week. When I was working in that gas station, they were pouring the foundation for the Kmart store that Craig just tore out. So there goes my first place I worked and the second place I saw a foundation go in. Speaking of foundations, 2 law enforcement folks from Missoula County Sheriff's Office over here. I want to thank you, the foundation of everything, trustworthy, loyal, faithful, honest, true. Thanks for being here. All right. New market tax credits. What a stimulating title for a conversation. Chuck, come on up.
Before I get started, Craig, I live right around the corner from the South Crossing. I'm super excited, although I do have to point out I taught both of my kids how to ride a motorbike in May in that parking lot just because they could easily do turns. That's no longer going to be possible. The topic that Gary and I are going to put together is actually kind of a combination of 2, investing in a LEED building with new market tax credits. And I'm here primarily because of the LEED portion of it. And for a second purpose as well, Gary's not allowed in our firm to mess with technology. So that's why I'm starting off. Well, if somebody will let me. There we go. Okay. Well, that really fell flat after I gave Gary a hard time about not being allowed to do technology. Yeah. I joined the firm in 2005. At the time that I joined them, we were in our prior location at 199 West Pine, which was on the corner of Ryman and Pine. And it was pretty immediate that we had some issues that we needed to deal with. We had a fairly dated building. It was actually a combination or really a building that existed that was then built onto. And it was a fairly dated building that there was really no existing plan for. We quite didn't know where the pipes and the air conditioning ducts and things went to. It really had no room to grow whatsoever if we wanted to grow as a law firm. Also, at that point in time, the practice of law had changed where you used more like conference room spaces. Mediation had become fairly big. We were doing a lot of cases that involved mediation where you had to have a lot of parties meet in separate rooms. And also, you don't really want to meet with your clients in your office anymore. Not only are they fairly messy, but also you've got a lot of confidential information in there you don't need to be sharing with the world. And at that point, we were actually renting conference space across the street next to Sean Kelly, so we really had no room there. It was also very expensive to retrofit. We had gone through, I was a member of our building committee, and we'd gone through, with the help of Oz Architects, every possible iteration of what we could do, and it was a fairly expensive process. We had talked even about buying the space next to it that was the old Scooterville site and building a sky bridge, which I am assured we would have never gotten approved by the city. in connecting the two, but it was an interesting exercise in any event. But it would have been really expensive to do. And then finally, we had non-continuity of ownership. The building was actually owned by a subset of our partners, some of which had actually retired from the practice of law. And so we really didn't have that continuity of ownership that we were looking for. So ultimately, with a lot of work and a lot of effort, what we came up with was a brand new building at 350 Ryman on the old Scooterville site. And what we got from that was we got a very modern facility. We were able to, and we took a lot of pains and efforts into trying to have it designed for something looking 20, 30 years in advance, particularly with the technology understanding that we would be changing. For example, one of the things that we did is we got rid of a library. We really didn't need a library because for the most part, everything was going electronic. We also got 6 floors of space of about 1.5 is rented. I just realized that's actually incorrect. It's about 1.2 that's rented. There's about a third of the second floor if anybody's looking for space that's still possible. We also got conference and community space. We designed the bottom floor principally with the idea that there was going to be a lot of mediations. I've actually even been able to do an arbitration in one of those rooms where we set it up like a courtroom. And so it's a very versatile space that can be done. The other thing that is nice about it is we can do those late into the evening as well without disrupting the rest of the building. We also got the community space. The 6th floor, while it is for the firm, we also make available to a lot of different nonprofits and other associated events. Some of you probably gone to some events up there. And that was important to us as well. And then finally, we accomplished by doing this project the continuity of ownership that we've been looking for as well. So I'm going to quickly kind of walk through, we financed this through a new market tax credit. I'm going to quickly walk through a basic description of what that is. But it's a complicated process, and there's actually, I saw Barb Callahan in here. There's actually some people in this room that probably know a lot more about it. But it starts off with an entity called a community development entity, and the Montana CDC was the CDE that we used and is the one designated for Idaho and Montana. And they work with a qualified project. Now, the Montana CDC, or whatever the CDE is allocated tax credits from the CDFI fund. That's a subset of the Department of Treasury, and that's a competitive process that they have to go through an application, and they get so much allocated to them on an annual basis. Then the CDC works with an investor, in this case it's Warren Buffett, who's got money to invest, but he also has a high tax liability that he's looking to offset. And then also a lender, a bank. Both of those entities then contribute to some sort of an investment fund. And usually that's about an 80-20 split. So in this situation, theoretically, if we got $8 million from the bank on a loan and a $2 million qualified equity investment from the investor into that investment fund, they would then take that $10 million and it would go into the CDE. And in exchange, the Montana CDC is able to give them the tax credit. And it's equal to 39% of the total project costs. So it'd be about a $3.9 million tax credit. And then ultimately that tax credit goes over to the investor to offset their tax liability. So that's the return that that investor gets on the investment. Then finally, the CDE essentially makes 2 notes, okay, to the qualified project. In this situation, like the first one would be a note A would be the $8 million, which represents the bank loan. And then note B would be the amount of the qualified equity investment made by the investor. That's generally how the process works. I'll turn it over to Gary to talk about qualified, what makes for a qualified project and the criteria.
Thanks, Chuck. It's nice to be here. I can tell how old I am. I look out in the audience and I know way too many people. I've been here for a long time in Missoula, and I actually do know a little bit more technology than Chuck. I think I wouldn't have had a problem with that. He also doesn't know that I actually had that sky bridge approved across the alley. We decided not to go with that, but we actually did work on the sky bridge, and the city was very helpful in that, and we did have a way to do a sky bridge, but we decided we should do the new building. One thing that before I go on to the next slide, I want to mention on this new market tax credit structure is that actually the investor and the lender can actually be the same party. And as far as I know, in Montana, all the new market tax credit projects, the lender, the bank, and the investor have been one and the same party. In our particular case, we ended up using First Security Bank, and they were not only the lender, but also the investor, because they are, as you know, tax-paying entities, and they can use that tax credit. So that's probably important to know. And speaking of the banks, a lot of this information, by the way, that I have compiled today came from the Montana CTC right here in Missoula, Dave Glazer and Heidi DeArmond and their staff, and they're wonderful to work with, and they are the Montana CDE that has the money allocated for these projects. And they work real hard to get money. And as a matter of fact, they have, since the inception of this project, had $220 million allocated to Montana, and they've used something like $190 million of that already through these projects. And these are the banks here, and you can see Missoula is well represented. These are banks that have done new market tax credit projects in Montana, and maybe Idaho too. I'm not sure about the Idaho projects. But Glacier Bank Corp, of course, with First Security Bank in town, and Wells Fargo, Mountain West, U.S. Bank, and American Federal, all in Missoula. So we're well represented, and they're banks that know this structure and are willing to participate. So I also wanted to say one other thing that's really important before I get to my part of this. Let's go back one. This tax credit part from the investor, that's the part that makes these projects really viable. When we were doing our project, we went back and forth, decided we wanted to build a new building. Well, that was in 2008, 2009. You know what was happening then. The economy was really struggling, especially late 2008, early 2009. We were having trouble making our project pencil out between the cost of construction still being pretty high and interest rates being high, but the value of real estate going down, and because we needed 100% financing, it wasn't penciling out. So this investment part is really infusing equity into a project. That's what makes these things work. I think without new market tax credit equity, our project would not have gone forward. We were looking at either delaying it, not doing it, or moving outside of downtown to find some property that might have been cheaper. So I really do think new market tax credits made this our project viable. And you'll see a little bit more about that in a minute. What about the criteria for qualified projects? Who can take advantage of these projects? It's not everyone by any means. First of all, they will not look at a project unless the total project's cost is at least $4 million. So it's not for the smaller projects. Number two, and really importantly, this is, as Chuck said, a federal program administered by the U.S. Treasury. So for them, the idea is they want to make sure that they're benefiting low-income areas. That's the idea. They're trying to revitalize low-income areas. So a project has to be located in a low-income census tract. And I was a bit surprised that Missoula really is. Almost all of Missoula, the urban area, is a low-income census tract, and that's based on poverty rate, and in some cases on median income. And the downtown area and the university have a number of low-income individuals. I think they use students and all of that. So I can't quite figure that out, but I was a little surprised to find out that we are in a low-income census tract, but we are. So almost anywhere in the urban area, you're going to find that we do qualify. The other big policy behind the federal law is that the investments are expected to result in community benefit and revitalization. And that's generally in the form of job creation. That can be short-term job creation and long-term job creation. And I'll tell you in a minute what our project did in that regard. And the federal government all wants to make sure that they hope that the project results in material improvement to the lives of the residents of the low-income communities. And that's the idea behind and the policy behind the law. One thing that's important to know, even though the project has to be located in a low-income census tract, the borrower, the developer, does not need to be low-income. That's the idea. They want to use some necessarily even high wealth individuals or companies to make sure they do some development that will benefit the community. So it doesn't matter what your income is. You can qualify as long as you're in a low income census tract or benefit the low income census tract. So that's really important. And what can it be used for? It's fairly broad. It can be used for the expansion of operating businesses. It doesn't necessarily have to be brick and mortar, although most of them are. And it can facilitate real estate development. The only thing I didn't put on this slide, and I should have, is that 20% of the income from the final project has to be generated from non-residential purposes, so it has to be commercial. So you can't build, for example, an entire apartment complex or condo. You have to have 20% from commercial. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits of a project like this. And the first thing that I just told you about that I forgot to put on this slide is that the infusion of that capital in our project made the project go. That was back from the first slide. I think our project would not have gone had, in our case, First Security Bank, they were the investor. They could use the tax credits. They put somewhere between $3 and $4 million into our project, and they get the tax benefit from that. So we get the benefit of the equity in the project. That is how our project eventually penciled out. So that's why that's really important, and I didn't put that on here. But some of the other benefits are, without going into too much detail, these new market tax credit projects have a seven-year compliance period, and during that period, federal law requires that the borrower, the developer, pay interest only on the debt. This is both the bank debt and the investor debt. So it gives developers an opportunity for 7 years to make sure their project is successful. So that's a huge benefit for the developers. It will be a bit of a interesting situation in about 2 years when we have to start paying principal. I think our hourly rates are going to go up again, but for 7 years we had a really good opportunity to help our project. And then after 7 years, there's two notes in the project, as Chuck told you. There's the Note A, which is basically your standard commercial construction loan, which is all at fair market rates. That's in our case, a construction loan for the building. But then you've got the Note B, which is the investment portion of this, which is about $3 or $4 million. There's a couple of things about that's a benefit. Number one, that investment portion that infused the equity, the repayment of that is an extremely low interest rate. Our rate was 0.5%. So you add that together with the commercial rate on the larger contract, it makes the overall project much more affordable. So that's a real benefit to a developer. It brings the cost down. But more importantly, you'll love this piece. At the end, you actually can get that debt forgiven. And it gets really complicated. I'm not going to tell you how you do it. Basically, this whole scheme that Chuck showed you, the thing collapses at the end after 7 years, and basically the borrower ends up having control over the investment fund, and it's a note payable to yourself, and you can forgive that if you want to because you have control over it. The problem with that, as we're going to find in a couple of years, is if you do that, you have major tax implications because that's forgiveness of debt. So, but the other thing that it does, the last one on here, is there's other ways, there's flexibilities on things to do with some notes, and I know people here in Montana that have done this are looking at other ways of doing it. For example, we're looking at taking that note and contributing it to a 501c tax-free charity in Missoula and getting the benefit of that contribution, which will take care of some of the tax liability. So there's lots of flexibility, and we're not quite sure where we're going to go with that yet, but that's another benefit of this project. About finally here, what's really important is that there's community benefit from any of these projects, and before I list them for our building, at the bottom it's important to note that this was compiled by Montana CDC. They're required to report every year on these projects to the federal government. It works pretty well. These are the benefits they've compiled. I didn't want to get up and talk to you about the benefits of our project to you, but these are from the CDC that they report to the federal government. First of all, as a result of our project, there were 87 permanent jobs either created or retained downtown in the low-income census tract. It's probably a little more than that now with the fact that we've rented out the second floor and the part of the first floor. There were 38 construction jobs during the construction period, which was a real benefit. We worked with the with Missoula to try to align our building with the downtown master plan to get some retail and some other commercial space, especially on the first floor, which we probably would not have otherwise done, and that aligned with the master plan and the streetscape that they wanted downtown. We agreed to make conference space available to nonprofits, which we've done on a real regular basis, both on the first floor and the sixth floor. One of the things that our project did in 2009 was it kept non-residential construction from actually declining. It was a real benefit at that time that we kept just commercial construction level during that period. Everything else declined in Missoula during that period. So this one project, according to Montana CDC, kept the market from declining. This one I don't know if I'm happy about or sad about, but actually the project on that corner, now there's a 20-fold increase in taxes that we will pay to Missoula County. And John just has thumbs up on that one. He likes that. But that's what happens when you develop a building like this. And another big benefit was we worked really close. First of all, we went to the city to see if they could use our old building. We worked closely with Missoula County, and that was the time they were looking to build and expand their facilities. They were going to maybe go outside of the downtown area. If you remember, they were looking for $15 to $20 million to build a new building. We worked it out so as part of this overall project that they could lease and then eventually buy our building for substantially less. It's not on here, but Montana CDC said that saved the taxpayers between $17 and $20 million because of that, because they could move their administrative offices across to our building, which they've renovated and is really a very nice facility now. And one other thing is it did, as I said before, it kept us downtown, and we hope that's a benefit to downtown Missoula rather than going outside of town to build a cheaper building. And finally, they have said that us doing LEED Gold was a benefit for the community in terms of the environment, and that is what Chuck wants to talk about now, real quickly, I think.
Some of you are familiar with LEED, and I'll just go quickly sort of what our experience was with it. Early in the process, there was a commitment from the firm that we wanted to do some sort of a LEED certification and build the building in that regard under those standards. What is LEED certification? It stands for the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Essentially, it's a scorecard. It's done by the U.S. Green Building Council, which is an industry group that came together after some pressure on the construction and the building industry to put together some standards. And they have various points that you can receive in any kind of a project or a revitalization of an older project. We were under version 2.2. I think they're up to version 4.0 at this point. And there was about 69 points total. Depending on how you design it, you get points within various categories for various things like sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy, indoor environmental quality, those sorts of things. Then as those points, what you've got is essentially various levels. And if you think about it like a ladder, the bottom level would just be basically the building code. You got to build something to meet the building code. And then from there on out, you can move on up from LEED certified to LEED silver, LEED gold, and then LEED platinum. Believe it or not, there is actually a higher level that's not a LEED part. It's called the Living Building Challenge. Part of LEED has been criticized that it's not green enough, and they've actually come up with a higher level of criteria from a different group called the Living Building Challenge. Over time, about 200 different state, city, and federal agencies now actually require LEED certification for new public buildings. So while it's not required by law, if you're going to build a public building, and for a lot of those agencies, they require that you get some sort of a LEED certification at a certain level. And then also in about 85 or greater larger cities like Los Angeles, they require private construction to follow LEED. So I think that ultimately what's going to happen is it's just going to be required, ultimately. One of the things that we found from cost of LEED certification is that the prices are not incremental, that they actually go up dramatically once you start getting past the silver into the gold and then ultimately up into the platinum. And so that's something that you need to consider if you're looking at a LEED project. With ours, we were able to do it a number of different ways. First of all, we avoided high-rise requirements. We used a new heating and cooling system that relies on water rather than air, that meant that the space in between the various floors got compressed. and we were able to stay right under high-rise requirements, which resulted in about a $500,000 savings in construction costs that we were then able to use to invest back into the various LEED things. We also took advantage of where we were at, our site. We got quite a few points for LEED just from where our location was. We were doing urban infill, and we were next to a bus station, and alternative forms of transportation is a big part of that. We had already planned for various things that promote sort of alternative commuting, like having lockers and bike storage for our people. We especially knew we were going to lose some of our parking spaces as well. So we were already planning for that, and that ended up being a positive thing for LEED. And then we were already committed to buying local wherever possible. That was another thing that we had actually committed very early on in the project, that to the extent that we could use local contractors, local material suppliers where possible, we were going to do that. And then finally, we took advantage of incentives from Northwestern Energy, especially with putting in the heating and cooling system. It's important to know that, you know, from doing LEED, we don't get any kind of a tax benefit. There's no tax write-off or anything as a result of getting LEED certified. It's a voluntary thing, but there were some private incentives provided by the utilities for some of the portions of it. Finally, for conclusions and tips, ultimately, new market tax credits are not for everyone, but if you've got a project that meets that criteria, it's something that can be a very valuable tool, and in our situation, it actually made it possible for us to build the project. It would not have been done otherwise. New market tax projects can benefit not only the borrower, but also bring jobs and other benefits to the community, and that was a very important consideration for us as we went forward on the project. If you're looking at doing anything that includes a LEED project, my recommendation would be that you consider the LEED early on in the process. You'd be surprised at how many of the things that you would choose or that you can get points for would be things that you would do otherwise. I've never really sat down and penciled it out, but in my mind, I'm thinking about 70% of the decisions that we made for LEED certification or counted towards LEED were things that we would have done anyway, and they just made good sense. And sometimes by doing the LEED certification, it makes you think of additional things that you can do. And then ultimately, I can't say enough, a lot like Craig said about the various folks that are available that can give you advice, and I would encourage you to seek out those resources, specifically the Montana CDC, the Missoula Economic Partnership, your banker. That list of lenders, particularly a great First Security Bank, was absolutely wonderful in helping us guide through the process. An experienced LEED consultant is very helpful as well on the LEED side of things. And then ultimately your contractor, our general contractor was Jackson Contracting, and they handled very well a client that consisted of a group of attorneys trying to build a building, which must have been a pretty big challenge to them. But, you know, work with those contractors as well. They can give you a lot of information and a lot of alternatives as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Chuck. While Nicole changes out the technology and Dr. Engstrom makes his way up here, how many people have been on the top floor of the GLR building? Oh, yeah. Great, great community around. All right, Dr. Royce Engstrom, the University of Montana, partnership with Missoula businesses. I can't wait.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon. What a pleasure it is to be a part of today's discussion and to have the university increasingly viewed as such an important partner in the economic development and quality of life development of our community here in Missoula. Kim, thank you very much, and Sean, thank you very much for the invitation to be a part of today. I want to just say a word of thanks to a couple of folks in the audience that you met already, but who are so important to the success of the University of Montana. Clay Christian here is my boss and the Commissioner of Higher Education in the state of Montana, and Fran Albrecht, who many of you know, is our newest regent, the governing body for higher education in the state of Montana. I really appreciate the support that both of you have in showing up today. We have a number of folks in the audience who are from the university, and these folks are all actively engaged one way or another in interactions with the community and in many cases with development of the economy here in Missoula. So Dean Dave Forbes is back here, the Dean of our College of Health Professions. and biomedical sciences. Dave is actually on the board for the Missoula Chamber of Commerce. So Dave, thanks for your service. Dean Barry Good is here, and I'll be talking about the Missoula College here in just a few moments, and Dean Barry is the dean of that college. Dean Larry Gianchetta I saw back here somewhere, and I'll give you a few examples of things happening in his college that relate to the development of our economy and quality of life here in Missoula. I also saw Barbara Kuster, the director of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture, which I know many of you enjoy over the years somewhere, and Bill Johnston over here, our alumni director, who many of you know as well. These folks are so important to the university moving forward in the relationships with our community. Those relationships are a tremendously special asset to the University of Montana. I have the opportunity many times during the course of a year to talk to university presidents from around the country. And I can tell you that very few of them enjoy the relationship with their host community that the University of Montana enjoys. Most of those presidents, when I talk about some of the projects and some of the kinds of interactions, and particularly the kind of support we get from Missoula, those presidents are envious. Many people in much larger communities than Missoula's don't have anywhere near the support that we enjoy. So that's something very special here, and I want to thank each and every one of you for the support and the contribution that you give to the University of Montana. You know, the richness of life here in Missoula is something to really brag about. If you think of the kinds of interactions that take place on really a daily basis between the community and the university, whether you think of it as in terms of the Missoula Symphony that many of you attend, or that Montana Museum of Art and Culture, or the upcoming alumni lecture series this year on rivers around Montana, or of course Grizzly Athletics, and every Saturday afternoon 26,000 of you pack into Washington Grizzly Stadium. And of course, downtown is such a supportive, thriving retail community for nearly 15,000 students that frequent downtown in one way or another. So there are so many ways that we interact as a community. But particularly in terms of business development and economic development, that's a particularly exciting and growing area of interest and responsibility for the University of Montana. All around the country, communities and states are looking increasingly to their universities to help stimulate the economy, help promote and develop a thriving workforce, and generate new ideas that might bring new opportunities to the citizens around that particular university. So while the University of Montana has always been very involved in workforce development, how many of you are graduates of the University of Montana? Quite a few, okay. So talk about workforce development. Many of you got your start at the University of Montana and take those educational skills and put them to work in the workforce. But lately, we've been trying to be more deliberate about actually helping to drive that economy, not just supply the workforce, but helping to drive that economy. So today I'm going to give you just a few examples of some interesting things going on at the university that ultimately will help drive that economy. And I'll end up then talking about the Missoula College, the specific project just down the road from us here. So let me first just start by setting a little bit of context. This is information actually that Nick brought to my attention, but that came from the Center for the Rocky Mountain West. And it's a graph that shows the labor earnings generated by different economic sectors here in Missoula County. And so the third bar down, which amounts to $263 million, is on that chart. The third bar down is state government, almost all of which here in Missoula relates to the University of Montana. And so last year alone, the University of Montana had a total funds budget of $379 million. That's a pretty big operation. And the vast majority of that money entered the economy right here in Missoula, one way or another. We do make the occasional purchase of scientific instrumentation or things like that from other places, but by and large, most of that $379 million somehow makes its way into the Missoula economy and ultimately into the state. So just that, with that as context, then let me just show you a few examples of some really neat things going on, really spearheaded by some of the people that I introduced and all of the faculty and staff at the university. So let me begin with Montech. Montech is our business incubator facility that's located just down the road from where we are now, just on East Broadway over here. And the purpose of Montech is to provide a home for businesses that want to transfer ideas from the university into the private sector, or just from the community into the private sector, but typically ideas based on technology or some sort of transfer of intellectual property from the university or a laboratory into the private sector. Montech is a really exciting place to be right now. We did a multi-million-dollar renovation on Montech just a couple of years ago, making it the home for our anchor tenant, Rivertop Renewables. Rivertop Renewables is a company that started out of the work of a chemistry professor, Don Kiley here, who upon retirement took his ideas from his research laboratory into the business of what has now become Rivertop Renewables. It's a business that employs 20 people right now, on their way to doubling that over the course of the next year or so. It's a chemical company that makes specialty chemicals based on a process that Professor Kiley discovered and obtained the intellectual property to in his work. A tremendous success story, and I think a good example of a way that a company can develop and employ college graduates, university graduates, that might not have been able to find employment in Missoula just a couple of years ago. Is there anybody here from Rivertop today? I wonder if there might be. Okay, well anyhow, it's a great operation. Some other startups are in place in Montech or recently graduated from Montech. Acuity Designs is a student-launched 3D printing company that has raised $100,000 to get started as a company. They're now a part of the Montech community. FilmSpur is an internet startup at Montech, developing a new platform for video viewing and voting on the web. And so they're a part of Montech. Sunburst Sensors is a graduate of Montech. They're a company launched by one of our chemistry faculty members, Mike DeGrandpre. They make sensors for ocean research, and so they started in Montech and graduated from there. It now is a good going concern. A lot of that work is based on research done at the university, and I want to take this opportunity just to highlight a research grant that just came in that, while not so directly connected to economic development, probably will be. And this is a grant that came out of Dave Forbes College, the College of Health Professions and Biomedical Sciences. Two of our faculty members, Professor Patel and Professor Rao, were just selected by the NFL, the National Football League, to conduct brain trauma research, one of 16 entities in the country selected to do this research. And so that's a tremendous honor and a tremendous reflection of the creativity that our faculty bring to the table. The John Raffato Business Plan Competition is a way of students getting started in getting a business idea started and off the ground. The young man that you see here is Joe McMahon. He was the winner of last year's business plan competition, and he presented a project to start what he called the Magnet Company, a social media-based company. And he is now, he has converted that into Woodblock Creations, an LLC, and he is off and running with his idea. And past participants of that business plan competition are in business today in companies that we know of here right in Missoula. The Market on Front Street was one of the UM Raffato business plan participants, Ben Sokolowski, who I think some of you know. Five on Black, a new restaurant in town. Tom Snyder, another business plan participant. So that's a wonderful opportunity for our young folks to present an idea, usually in a team fashion, and actually, in many cases, bring it to fruition as a real company. Last summer in the Capitol over in Helena, we had the opportunity to announce a new initiative called the Blackstone Launchpad. And this is a program designed to help students become entrepreneurs. It's started as a $2 million grant in partnership with Montana State University, and the office will open on February 13th on campus. It's an office designed to provide guidance and advice to students and alumni who are interested in starting a company. And so we're in the process of hiring our director for this Blackstone Launchpad, and we're looking forward to that day when we can open the office just a few weeks away. That will be a vehicle for people to get started, moving their ideas into real businesses. An academic area that has become just almost an explosive activity for us here, both at the university but in Missoula, is in the area of big data and cybersecurity. A number of you, I suspect, saw just a few weeks ago an announcement where Missoula was identified as the 5th largest city in terms of IT startups in that small city category of 250,000 or smaller. James Grunke helped me last fall put together a business roundtable. We focused on IT. I was amazed at how many people came out to that event who have either startup companies or very well developed companies in the area of IT. So this has become a focus for us now, with a good deal of help from people here in the private sector. Quickly, there are several pieces to this effort on the part of the university. One is a new cybersecurity certificate program that will operate out of the Missoula College, a 4-course program that somebody can take on top of any major to become certified essentially in the area of cybersecurity. With the help of some of the companies in town and their financial donations, we've actually started now a cyber innovation laboratory. It was featured on the news just a few days ago when Congressman Daines came to see it. We have had now for the last year or so an IBM big data curriculum in the School of Business Administration, supported with the help of IBM. A new speaker series on cyber innovation, and I'm proud to announce that we've raised nearly $100,000 in new scholarship money for students who will go into some aspect of computer science. Well, let me turn to end here with the Missoula College, a project that is so exciting for the University of Montana. And I want to start this conversation by saying squarely to the Chamber of Commerce, thank you for your tremendous help during the last legislative session. It was your help that helped put this whole project over the top in terms of legislative support. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. The legislature appropriated $29 million for this building project, with the expectation that we'll raise $3 million additional to finish out the project. So we're in the process of that. We decided to put the Missoula College right here on East Broadway, literally just a few blocks from where we sit today. And we decided that for several reasons. Proximity to the main campus that will allow us to do good, cost-effective education, providing the student services that we should provide to our 2-year students. Of most appeal to me, though, that location forms a bridge to the downtown business community, a link between the campus, Missoula College, and downtown. It's right next door to Montech, the business incubator facility that I talked about, and there are already some really good programmatic interactions there. We couldn't have picked a higher visibility site. No one will be able to drive by Missoula without seeing the new Missoula College of the University of Montana. So we're in the process then of moving through the steps we need to construct this building. Our environmental assessment is nearing completion, and I will, in all likelihood, sign off on that within a matter of days. Then we'll move into the final design stages of the building itself, finish up our fundraising, and move into construction. So we're very excited about this location, and you will begin to see things happen there certainly in 2014. The architects are excited about the location because they feel they have plenty of flexibility, plenty of liberty, and they can make use of the gorgeous natural setting in which this building will reside. So this is just one conception. It may not end up looking like that, but it's one idea that we have going forward for the building. The details of the floor plans are underway now, and so the floor plans, it will be a 4-story above-ground building in all likelihood. with rooms for classrooms, laboratories, studios, computer rooms, faculty offices, and so on. It's going to be just a beautiful building that really enhances not only education, but the business community here in Missoula. The programs available in that building will essentially be all of the programs that are now offered at the Sentinel High School site. And so those are programs related to the health professions, to business and business development, to IT, and of course the core courses that people can take to get an Associate of Arts degree to transfer. That is going along so well, and we're very pleased with the progress. And I can't say enough about the help of Mayor Ingen and folks at the city who have been working with us closely on the planning for this building and really the integration of this building into the community of Missoula. Those are just a few things going on, so thanks for your attention.
On behalf of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank you all for coming today. We are a catalyst for conversation in the community, as demonstrated by today's State of Missoula. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Be productive.